Welcome back again, ladies, gents, boys, girls. Mad for Steam here. As you've probably figured, no Loco in sight this week. That's gone down to Mike Pavey. But the good news is we've got the static test videos coming up for you. The bad news is, you know what, I'm not totally sure about them, but I'll ask for your comments. You tell me what you think. Rather than having a bare bench, we've got some Gauge 3 models that I've built for you. I started off, as most people do, with Upper Market, which is a double O gauge end-to-end layout, was featured in British Railway Modelling. And then I moved up the gauge and found ourselves in Gauge 3. And now, of course, we're at the big boys and girls gauge. So I'll re-up the Upper Market video, and I'm sure there'll be a link at the top of your screen on the left as usual. So before we get on to the comments and what's in the workshop, we do have some very positive news. We have passed over 100,000 watches for the series, so thank you so much. And we've got our first YouTube check, hurrah! £81.48. Let's start with the positive first. Francois wrote from South Africa, Cape Town. Welcome. He's been watching the videos and he's bought one of these kits. In fact, he got the last one from the batch. So I'm really pleased you've decided to take the plunge. He does say that Silver Crest owes me some commission. Well, full disclosure, I was gifted this by Silver Crest. I've made the model. We don't charge them for the videos, and but you get my honest opinions. And also a very useful tip from Martin Rothwell talking about boiler testing, and he's mentioning NAME and SAME. I think it's the Northern Association of Model Engineers and the Southern Association for boiler testing. And also, as many people have mentioned bending spanners, and we'll come on to that with what's in the workshop. And finally, a message from Tim, and this isn't so good. He wasn't particularly pleased about the quality of the kit that he got. He mentioned that a couple of bolts were cross-threaded and rounded off possibly, and there were a few scratches, scuffs and scrapes. Well, I'm not here as a paid-for ambassador for Silver Crest, and you know, I always tell it how it is, and I share your frustration. I can say yes, on my kit there were a couple of spanner rash marks where things had been taken apart, and a couple of the bolts needed to be touched in, but I had nothing like cross-threaded bolts or anything losing their threads. You know, this show's not about Silver Crest, it's about you and your experience. The quality, I guess, of disassembly will vary. You said, have you made the right decision? I don't know. If it's a shelf queen, then probably you should have bought a ready to run. But if you want the excuse to have some fun putting it together, then you have made the right decision. But, you know, Silver Crest, there isn't an excuse either way. When I mentioned getting into those difficult places in the cab to get those unions done up for the left-hand water tank, some people have mentioned these things. And they are crow's feet spanners, apparently. Never heard of them. The idea is one end is like a normal spanner and the other end it's at 90 degrees. And people have said you can heat normal spanners up and bend them. But again, I'll put the details on screen from Temu. I thought for the money had to be worth a go. I also referred to my cheap petrol station purchase of a set of tools. Again, I found these on Temu, and this is your main tool here. And you get, this is the important bit, the bendy bit that allows you to get into difficult places. And for some reason, a pair of tweezers, I don't know why. And you also get a whole load of bits that you can fish out, put in the end, and as a bonus prize, if you want to learn to play the guitar, You also get some guitar string pluckers. And finally, as Christmas is rapidly approaching, don't worry, other religious and pagan festivals still apply, and I'm not here to offend anybody, but as far as I'm concerned, it's still Christmas. Thanks, by the way, Shadman and Shadman's wife for this amazingly realistic Christmas decoration, which I treasure, but I'm probably not going to keep it in shot. But here's my real Christmas present to self. This is the patented Acme steam whistle, as used by guards across the country. And I've always fancied one, so I thought I'll treat myself. So rather than going toot toot every week, now I can do... Now, when Mike took delivery of my Loco, he did spot one rather glaring omission. I managed to get the axle pump bolted in upside down, and it won't work. You can see here the axle pump is actually connected to the frame stretcher, and then you bolt the frame stretcher in. Well, there was my error, and thanks Mike for sorting that out. On the bright side, that horrible gloop that I managed to get all over myself when I did the smoke box seemed to be working, and it was airtight. So have a look at the video. I'll give you a couple of thoughts afterwards, but have a look and you tell me what you think.
Right, when you take your locomotive to your model engineering club or your local track, before they allow you to run it, they'll want to carry out two tests on it. The first test is a hydraulic test, which I'm going to show you now, and the second test is a steam accumulation test, which is carried out with a fire with the engine in steam. And we'll demonstrate that when the engine's at the track. Right, for the hydraulic test, the boiler is completely filled with water. The safety valves are screwed down hard, so the springs are coil bound, and the bridge bars are actually pressing the balls hard onto the seatings, so it can't open. Then there's a hydraulic test rig, which the club will supply, and it's connected to the boiler via the adapter that's supplied with the kit. So if I pump water into it, water is not compressible, so it doesn't take long for the pressure to rise. And they'll test it to 1.5 times working pressure, which is 135 pounds for working pressure of 90 pound. And that's now sitting there at 135 pound. They'll probably want to keep this test, to keep the pressure on for about 20 minutes. It varies for different clubs. When you've finished assembling your engine, you may want to run it on compressed air just to check it out. You don't need to, but it's a nice way to see it all working. So I've connected an air line via the same test connector as you use for the hydraulic test, and there's about 30 or 40 pounds square inch air in the boiler. So just in forward gear, and check it in reverse. I wouldn't run it too long on compressed air because none of the cylinders are properly lubricated. You really need steam and it's big fun.
A couple of thoughts. Here, just to reprise, Mike mentions that in the kit you get the air adapter to allow you to introduce air into the boiler. Well, I didn't have one. Secondly, hey, this could be me. Listen, I'm no expert. I'm not even qualified to comment on this, but I thought it might be a bit smoother when it was run on air. Now, I know that we haven't introduced any lubricant into the lubricator, and I know everything's going to be a bit tight. But again, please leave me your own thoughts in the comments. What I'm going to do is once it's had its line trials, I'll be putting it on the bench here and running it on air myself and see if we can get it nice and smooth for you. Silver Crest are going to be taking the Loco to the West Huntsville track, and I'll be looking at that in 2 weeks' time when I'll give the model marks out of 10 I'll have 5 categories, and I'll be running it on air so we can see how it all goes. But remember, tune in just because we're not doing this until, say, the 14th. Remember, tune in on the 7th, because that's when we start our build of the Stirling Kit's beam engine. So I hope you'll all tune in for that. And I guess until then, all that remains for me to do is to say toot toot, or rather... And here's my gauge 3 flying bananas. Oh, hello.